Thank you for being here. My name is Peter Iwanowitz. I'm the Executive Director of Environmental Advocates in New York, and I'm really pleased that you're all here as we gather to not only mark the 45th anniversary of Earth Day, but also to sort of chart forward where we're going in the next 45 years, this being that first year. The press materials on the table have a short list of some of the more notable accomplishments that New Yorkers have achieved together over the past 45 years to improve public health, to protect the environment, and to restore our sort of natural resources. One year in particular rings out to me, and I'm young in this sort of movement, but one year in particular rings out to me, 1993. In that single year, we enacted together the Long Island Pine Barrens Protection Act, the Environmental Protection Fund, and the Clean Air Compliance Act. These are legacy laws and legacy standards that not only this generation, but future generations will reap the rewards from: healthier air to breathe, more open space protected, more communities enhanced through the funding of the Environmental Protection Fund. That was one session, probably maybe 6 weeks of one session after years of advocacy that those bills all came together. We can do that in the past, and we can do that again. So what a year that was. Let's call in the legislature to make 2015 a year like 1993 with successes. We got 6 weeks left. Can we do it, gentlemen? All right, we're with you. So New York has a great history of leading on environmental issues, with Republicans and Democrats alike standing up to protect our environment and public health. Yet the greatest challenges are ahead of us, particularly climate change and public health issues. New Yorkers have a right to know what's in their food, have a right to know whether the chemicals that are being put in children's have a right to know whether the chemicals that are in children's toys are toxic and whether they'll lead to health impacts. We should do our best to remove them from. New Yorkers have a right to clean drinking water and sewer systems at work. We saw some notable action this year in the legislature to improve that situation. And I think for environmental advocates and a lot of the legislators here, we're looking for leadership not only in the legislature but from the governor, so that New York can continue its leadership role. When you look at the issues that are sort of laid out in the press release, when you hear about the items that are in the past budget that was just enacted, when you hear from my colleagues in the environmental community today about what we're fighting for in the years ahead, New York has that opportunity to continue to be a leader on environmental issues nationwide, and this is the year to do it. So those are my opening remarks. I've kept them extremely brief to set a tone for my colleague advocates, and I know you're all saving your breath for your floor debates later today, so you'll be brief as well. But I want to turn now to the legislators who are here with us, and I'll introduce them one by one as they come up. And after we hear that, we'll also hear brief remarks from the colleague organizations that are here today to talk about a range of different issues that we want to see done, not only this year to protect current generations, but for future generations as well. So first I want to introduce Assemblyman Steve Engelbright. Steve is the new chair of the Assembly's ENCON committee. So Chairman Engelbright.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's really wonderful to be here on Earth Day, especially, and to be joined with my Assembly colleague, Felix Ortiz, as well as my other colleagues from both sides of the aisle and from both houses. Just a few thoughts on this 45th anniversary of our celebration of Earth. We have just completed a budget, and some of the things that we've accomplished so far in this session, I think, give us hope that we might be as productive, or at least begin to be as productive as that 1993 year that Peter Iwanowitz spoke of. This year we refinanced Superfund for another decade, ensuring sufficient funding to clean up past and future environmental misdeeds. We increased funding for the Environmental Protection Fund. Although it wasn't the increase that I wanted, I was pleased that EPF once again was moving in an upward direction. We still have a long way to go to achieve prior funding levels, but I fully recognize the importance of the EPF and will continue to advocate for additional increases. We also provided $200 million in funding over the next 3 years to invest in municipal wastewater and drinking water infrastructure. And if the session is like a basketball game, we've just completed halftime, and now we move to the second half, the closing part. We begin that today with 6 bills in the Assembly in celebration of Earth Day. These include some very important topics. Climate change. Bill that I'm sponsoring will be one of the 6 most important bills. Let me just make the observation that the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration indicated that February marked the 30th year of higher than average monthly temperatures worldwide. This was followed in March by an announcement that the globally average temperature over land and ocean surfaces for March 2015 was the highest for the month since record-keeping began in 1880. The impact on business, on commerce, on quality of life, on certainty for our children for the future is all at play when the climate is itself at play. We really need to address this issue. Similarly, children's products. The environment, to a large extent, is about the future, our children. We will be taking up a Children's Safe Products Act bill today. Microbeads, plastics in the environment, has been something that I focused on for many, many years. Legislator Schimmel today will help lead us on a debate that I believe has a real chance of being a major accomplishment for this session, to ban microbeads in cosmetic and other products. Environmental justice. Crystal Peoples will help lead us on issues that relate to fairness and the interface between our communities and the environment in the sense of what is right and what is appropriate. And mercury. Studies by the Environmental Protection Agency indicate that as many as 600,000 children per year are born with levels of mercury high enough to lower their IQ. We need to address this issue. As we go into the session in its second half, I look forward to many accomplishments. I look forward to working with these wonderful advocates and with my colleagues, and I look forward to having another press conference a little later to celebrate these accomplishments.
Sounds good to us. So next up is Senator Ampere. He is also new to the ENCON committee, chairing the committee for the first time this year, and he's going to share some remarks. Senator, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for coming out on this 45th anniversary of Earth Day. It wasn't too long ago when I thought 45 years was a long time and a big accomplishment. I don't feel quite so much that way anymore. But looking forward to another 45 years, and I want to thank all the advocates that are here and putting this together today. As the new chair in the Senate of the ENCON committee, I've really been taking a lot of time to get up to speed on a lot of the issues that we've been dealing with this year. I'm very pleased with the results that we got in the budget this year. With regards to brownfields, with regards to the Clean Water Fund that we were able to put together to hopefully get some projects kick-started in that arena where municipalities were unable to really access those funds that were there because of the burdensome tax cap we have on our municipalities, which has helped keep our property taxes down, but has also limited some projects that otherwise might get done. And I think this $200 million fund will help kickstart some of these projects and get going. But probably my favorite part of being the chairman of the ENCON committee is that I often get to talk about one of my idols, other than my father, but President Teddy Roosevelt and his great environmental accomplishments that really got a lot going for us in this state and this country nationwide. But it is with those remarks of looking forward to take account for our environment, to protect it, to move forward and do it in a rational and reasoned way so that we can work together. My focus is to work together with industry so that we can meet common goals, to reach the goals that we need to get things done. And I believe we have willing participants across the board to get to the ends that we need to get to, and ultimately will get there. And I look forward to continuing to work with all of you throughout the rest of this year, and as long as I remain chair of the NCON committee, which hopefully will be for a while. I enjoy it and look forward to continue working with you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. As Assemblyman and Chairman Engelbright remarked, Assemblyman Ortiz is here as well from New York City and Brooklyn. His remarks are so brief, he's actually said he's going to forgo them for all of us. So we're going to move to...
That usually gets the most applause.
He will be debating things on the floor later, though. So, I want to turn now to Vice Chair of the Senate Environmental Conservation Committee, Senator Avella from Queens. Senator.
I'm going to be equally as brief, but not completely brief. First of all, it's a privilege to be here as the Vice Chair of the Senate's Environmental and Conservation Committee. I think there are two things that we really need to do this session. There are a lot of things on the environment that we can move ahead, but two things we absolutely need to do, and that is the Child Product Safety Act. And Senator Boyle, who you'll hear from next, has been a real leader in the Senate on that. And the other thing is meaningful microbeads legislation. These are two things, I think, that could set the standard for this session. And I hope to be working with my colleagues in the Senate and the Assembly and the environmental advocates to get these two things done. And I'm going to take one quick second. I hope some of the press will stay, because I have a press conference immediately after this for a piece of environmental legislation to reform and start a new battery recycling program. And I have to tell you, Earth Day was an idea that came up 45 years ago to encourage people all across the globe to be interested in the environment. And will be joined in this press conference later on by somebody who took up that challenge. And he's sitting right here, and that's Elliot Soul, who came to me with this battery recycling program. Elliot is 11 years old. Elliot, stand up. And I have to tell you, he came to my office, he had a whole PowerPoint presentation, and from that presentation came the legislation that I'll be introducing later. So, Elliot, you're a terrific example of what Earth Day means, and we congratulate you for all that you've done in helping me draft this legislation. So I hope you'll stay.
Elliot, with a tie like that, you're guaranteed I'm staying and hanging with you. I have kids around your age at home. They would not forgive me if I didn't hang with you. Last and not least from the elected official side is Senator Boyle, sponsor of the Child Safe Products Act, also a frequent winner of Environmental Advocates Awards from our sister publication where we do our scorecards. The Senator's been a tireless advocate, not only for Child Products Act, but a real strong supporter for climate action. So, Senator, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you to my colleagues and government advocates and all of you for being here. I don't think many of you in the room are old enough to remember the first Earth Day 45 years ago, but being 53 years old, I do. And I remember mostly because my elementary school had a poetry contest. And I wrote the poem, it was the poetry about protecting the Earth in the first Earth Day, and my poem, I Am the Earth, won from my entire elementary school. Despite that, my career as a poet did not take off. But I'm happy to be as part of the State Senate now with my colleagues in other ways to protect the Earth. And we have a strong environmental agenda for this session, and most importantly, near and dear to all of our hearts, is the Child Safe Product Act, which now, and thank you, Assemblyman, Mr. Chairman, about passing it today in the State Assembly, and we now have more than half of the senators on as co-sponsors, which says it must be brought to the floor this session, as was said with my mentor and former Senator Owen Johnson, who was a great environmental advocate himself, and he was there during the early 90 years for the big environmental push. We can make 2015 like the early 90s as an environmental forefront in our agenda. And I promise, and I pledge today to the Senate leadership, when we bring the Child Safe Products Act to the floor for a vote in the Senate, I'm going to read my poem. Thank you.
It's like, you know, the dessert menu has been set. Let's go. So we're going to go through, and you're going to see how advocates can be extremely brief so that we can get some questions to reporters. So first up is Dick Ampere from the Long Island Pine Barren Society and also a board member of my august organization, Environmental Advocates.
My first year as an environmental advocate here in Albany was 1993, and I thought that's just the way the legislature worked. It's been a very difficult and a long period of time, but I think we're ready for another 1993 in 2015. There's so much to be done. I'm speaking about a regional problem. We have the most critical environmental, social, and economic problem ever to face Long Island, declining water quality. It's very serious. All of the organizations, all of the people, elected officials at every level recognize the problem and are seeking to do something about it. I hope the water infrastructure thing that Jess will talk about in just a minute will be helpful, but it just shows that the state is comprised of a lot of regions. We all have important needs, and it's important for this legislature to deliver on all of them. So goodbye 1993, hello 2015.
Next up is Kathy Curtis with the organization Clean and Healthy New York.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks. I, too, remember the first Earth Day, and I remember the spirit of hope and the sweeping federal legislation that came out as a result of that, the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, and there's no question that our air and water is cleaner as a result of those, however imperfect, federal laws. I would say that the last uncharted wilderness, the last frontier, if you will, for such sweeping legislation would be in the realm of toxic chemicals. And according to materials accounting data done by the states of Washington and New Jersey, about 95% of the toxic chemicals that leave a manufacturing facility don't do so in the air or the water or on land-based dumping, but in the actual products, whether it's brake fluid or perm solution or a binky in a baby's mouth. So that's really what we need to address. And the last, bastion of the use of toxic chemicals is in the products that we all use every day. And children, in particular, of course, are more vulnerable. And we're still seeing burgeoning rates, growing rates of pediatric cancer, obesity, asthma, autism, and other learning disabilities, and other diseases of environmental origin, many of which that have lifelong consequences. So this is the year to pass the Child Safe Products Act, and New York can be a leader in protecting not only children in New York State, but children in Wyoming and Indiana and Mississippi and other states that are not likely to be as the same type of leader. So this is the year. Let's get it through NCON. Let's get it to the floor. Thank you.
So next up to join us is Michael Hansen with the organization Consumers Union, and Michael is going to talk about legislation that's moving through the deal with genetically engineered crops and labeling disclosure requirements for food. So thank you, Michael.
Yes, thank you. It's an honor to speak here on the 40th anniversary of Earth Day. And some people might ask, I'm here to support mandatory labeling for genetically engineered foods. So you might ask, what does that have to do with the environment? And I'd argue that genetically engineered foods, these crops have actually been very bad for the environment because the vast majority of all the genetically engineered crops have been engineered to withstand the use of a toxic weed killer called glyphosate. If we look at the data for the food crops, corn, 89% of it is engineered with glyphosate tolerance. Soybeans, 94% are engineered with glyphosate tolerance. Canola, 93% engineered with glyphosate tolerance. Sugar beets, 99% that's engineered with glyphosate tolerance. So that means the rapid expansion of these engineered crops since 1996 has led to an explosion of herbicide use. USDA's own data show that between 1996 and 2011, genetically engineered crops used 527 million pounds more herbicides than their non-engineered counterparts. And in fact, glyphosate or Roundup in 1995, 20 million pounds were used in agriculture. By 2012, that figure was up to 280 million pounds. That has led to an explosion in glyphosate-tolerant weeds, so-called superweeds, 14 species in the U.S., 50% of the farms have them. Also, the Monarch Butterfly looks like it might be put on the endangered species list, and the research shows that the main reason for the collapse of monarch butterflies is the expansion of these glyphosate-tolerant corn and soybeans, because spraying of these herbicides has killed off the milkweed, which is the host plant. So there are these environmental impacts. Also, glyphosate was considered to be benign. That's why there's no testing for it in our food products. Well, it turns out just last month, the World Health Organization brought 17 top scientists from all over the world. This committee was chaired by Aaron Blair, who was for 25 years the head of the Cancer and Epidemiology branch at the National Cancer Institute. They unanimously agreed that glyphosate should be considered as a probable human carcinogen. And there is huge amounts of it now in our environment, and it's on all the crops. Nobody is testing for it. The EPA just last week said, well, maybe we should start testing. So part of the reason we need labeling of engineered foods is so people can make a decision themselves as to whether they want to support this technology or not. Thank you.
It's a good example of the challenges of moving from 1993, when we did the Pine Barrens Protection Act and other laws, to issues like genetically engineered food. So thank you, Michael, for sharing that info. Also, in New York, we have the challenge of we've become part of the oil patch. And Kevin Shalad from the Adirondack Council is going to talk about what many of the organizations are working on related to crude oil by rail. Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you. Well, thank you first to Assembly members Engelbright and Ortiz, and thank you to Senators O'Mara, Avella, and Boyle, and to all of my colleagues for joining together today in this celebration. On the 45th anniversary of Earth Day, we should celebrate the great environmental achievements of the last 4.5 decades that have brought about a new awareness of our connection that we call Earth, with our planet that we call Earth. But while reflecting on our past is important, we must remain aware of the value in understanding our history. The value is that we can learn from it, and that allows us to learn more and look forward and in understanding what we want to do. So in particular, I just want to talk about oil trains. They present a new and increasing threat to our state. Oil trains threaten clean water, wilderness, and the communities of the Adirondack Park every day. They carry millions of gallons of explosive crude oil over more than 100 miles of train track along the edge of Lake Champlain. Any accident involving an oil spill or explosion would be a great tragedy to our people, for the drinking water of 188,000 residents along Lake Champlain, and for New York's rarest and most sensitive wildlife habitats. We thank the legislature and the governor for increasing the state's oil spill fund from $25 million to $40 million. We would like to see that fund increase to $100 million in the coming years. Oil spill companies and railroads should be required to have insurance policies sufficient to cover the cleanup and recovery costs of any accident. But of course, prevention is better than attempting to clean up after a spill. And the surest way to prevent a spill in the park would be to stop transporting oil on our railroads. As a nation, we should be developing clean, renewable energy instead of continuing to rely on fossil fuels that produce greenhouse gases and overheat our climate. Climate change threatens every portion of the Adirondack Park, from the top of Mount Marcy to the shores of Lake Champlain. With the time remaining in this legislative session, we urge lawmakers and the governor to focus on other things like science-based reforms to the Adirondack Park Agency Act on top of oil train reforms. Also, as the release notes, I just want to mention that the APA was the first regional land use agency in America. Its rules are 40 years old, and it's time for an update. In addition, the Adirondack Council will also be seeking reforms to all-terrain vehicle riding that will better protect the forever wild Adirondack Forest Preserve, while expanding opportunities in more appropriate riding areas. And finally, we urge the state to make changes to the timberland tax abatement programs to make them fair to local governments and more effective in encouraging private landowners to keep their forest lands intact. Happy Earth Day to everyone, and thank you.
So last up is going to be Jess Otney from the Nature Conservancy, who's going to talk about water infrastructure and the water stuff in the budget.
I'm second to last. The very important Blair Horner, I believe, will follow me. I actually get a great job today, which is to start off by saying thank you. So this year, the governor and our legislators worked hard to make sure that they increased environmental funding in our state budget. As was noted, the Environmental Protection Fund was increased, but even more importantly, a major issue facing one of New York's most critical natural assets, our clean water, was addressed. And the first step was taken to start a new funding program to fund desperately needed water infrastructure projects across the state. $200 million was included in this year's state budget. As some of the legislators have noted, to address this need, there are studies that show that there are $36 billion worth of projects across the state that are needed to keep our communities clean and safe and make sure our water stays clean and safe and drinkable and swimmable and fishable, which is important for our economy. So we're very excited about the creation of this new funding in the budget, and we hope it's just the first step. We think that next year, growing environmental funding will be more important than ever. These needs will not go away. And it happens to be the 20th anniversary of the last Environmental Bond Act. So we think that this year was a great moment to set the stage for an even greater budget in the coming year. So thank you all for your work.
So we're going to turn now in the program to questions from the press corps, folks in the press that want to sort of talk.
The micro legislation, actually, Senator Ampere, take off. Regardless, are the Senate and the Assembly on the same page on that in terms of the micro-B legislation? I know there was a couple different bills floating around. Where are things on that?
The good news is that we're still talking and trying to do some problem solving. There are differences at the present time, but those differences are in the process of being ironed out. I anticipate that with our third-party validators, the folks standing over here, that impasse is just not a word that will be acceptable.
What are the topics of conversation in terms of reconciling?
I'm not going to go into the details because the process is very dynamic, and I don't want to compromise it. Please believe me, though, we are talking at the staff level. It is a very high priority in both houses, and so I see that as something that bodes well. Stay tuned.
This would have been a better question for Senator Ampere, but Senator Boyle, could you tell us when you think we'll see the Child Safe Products Act introduced? Last year it sort of came in at the very end of session and just got left on the table like a lot of things to do when they're brought in late. Is this going to be brought in within the next few weeks, or might it be into the final days? And also tell me what the holdup is.
Well, we have a starting point, and everything's got to happen by the end of session. Obviously, there's a lot of other things happening right now, but this is a priority, and we need to make sure that all of our members are focused on it, and particularly leadership. I mean, as I say, the legislation is more than half of the co-sponsors in the Senate, and any final passage is not assured, but very hopeful for consideration. We are pushing extremely hard to have it considered on the floor. I know that obviously it's the sign that the chairman was here at the press conference is a good sign, and other leaders in the Senate are saying the right things about it, and we have Republicans, Democrats, and Independent Democratic Conference members as co-sponsors. It shows a strong overall support, and the fact that we have more than half, and I believe we're going to get more co-sponsors. So in strength, there's numbers, so or numbers of strength. So I do believe that this is the year, and I think that'll even the governor's agenda obviously had it in there. He seems to be focused on it, so we're all heading in the right direction.
Other questions? So before I just sort of wrap up, I also want to recognize a couple other colleagues in the environmental community who took the Felix Ortiz route of being extremely brief with remarks. Blair Horner, Legislative Director and longtime environmental advocate for NIPERD, New York Public Interest Research Group, and Chris Gecken, who's the Legislative Director from the New York League of Conservation Voters. So thank you both for being here. So thank you, everybody.